In this video, we're going to cover the various types of objects in the software. There are a few types. First, there are plugin objects. These are like polygons, rectangles, stairs, walls. Essentially, any tool that you use will create a plugin object. There are then container objects. These are objects that essentially group or contain objects. Groups are one, symbols are another. Then there are hybrid objects. These are objects that contain both a 2D geometry and 3D geometry. These can be plugins or symbols. Finally, we have resource objects. These are symbols, line types, hatches, gradients, essentially any attribute or resource that is accessed through the resource browser. Let's go over plugins. As I mentioned before, all tools pretty much create plugin objects. Plugin objects use a set of adjustable settings to create the object. A good example of this is the polygon or rectangle tool. As you can see here, there's just a couple parameters to set, and you can create a polygon, rectangle, pretty much any basic object. Now, there are more complex ones, such as the stair tool, for example. Here you can see there's many more parameters used to create this object, and it's a much more complex plugin object. Now let's go over container objects. Like I mentioned before, the two main ones are groups and symbols. We'll start with groups. Essentially, you would use grouping or groups just to organize your document, to put together any objects you would like to always treat as a single object. To create a group, you just select one or more objects and then go to Modify Group. This will place them into a single group. It is now one object. If you click on it, you can move it and all the objects within the group will move together. If you ever need to edit these objects, you need to edit the group. There are a couple ways to do this. Easiest way is to just double click on the group. This will take you into the edit mode where you can edit the individual objects. You can also right-click or control-click on Mac on the object and choose Edit. You'll notice in the Edit mode, there is a orange border around the outside of the drawing area, as well as a button in the upper right corner that says Exit Group. After you're done editing, you just click this button to exit the group and return to the main drawing area outside of the group. Now let's go into symbols. You can think of symbols as advanced groups. They are similar to groups in that you can combine multiple objects into a single object. Just select the objects and go to Modify, Create Symbol. However, there are some major differences. As you can see here with a symbol, you have insertion and unit options, as well as the ability to insert a symbol into walls, for example. Symbols are edited in the same way as groups as well. Just double click or right click or control click on Mac to edit the symbol. There are a few advantages to using symbols rather than groups. Symbols can be hybrid objects and are also saved as resources. We will come back to hybrid objects and resources later in this video. Now let's talk about another type of object. These are known as history objects. Essentially, a history object, or an object that contains a history, is an object that stores the base objects that were used to create it. A really good example of this is just a basic extrude. An extrude normally will start with a base 2D object, like a rectangle, circle, polygon, and then you use the extrude command in the model menu to give it a 3D height or extrusion. However, this extrude object still stores that base 2D object that was used, or profile. To edit that, it's the same way as editing a group or a symbol. You just double click on the extrude, and this takes you into the edit view for the extrude. Here you can select and manipulate the base object. For example, here it's just a rectangle. Most of the commands that create or generate 3D objects in the software will maintain or keep a history of the base objects that were used to generate it. In addition to extrude, like extrude along path, for example, also contains a history. This one's a little bit different though. It contains actually two separate objects. For extrude along path, you have a path object and a profile. So a profile like a rectangle we had for our extrude, and a path object, sort of like a line, polyline, that basically determined the path of the extrude. To edit these, you essentially right-click on the object and choose to edit either the profile or the path. A solid addition is another type of history object. A solid addition in this case contains two solid objects that were added together. Again, just double click on it and you can access the objects within it. The trick here, though, is that if you had two extrudes that you added together to create this solid addition, once you double click to go into the solid addition, you can then double click on the individual extrudes to get back to the base 2D profile that was used to create those objects. So now let's go over hybrid objects. We mentioned these a few times previously. Hybrid objects, as I mentioned, have separate 2D and 3D geometry. What this means is that when you're in a top plan view, which is essentially the only 2D view in the software, you see a 2D representation of an object or of the hybrid object. This is to give you the ability to have 2D attribute settings and basically essentially separate your 2D visualization from your 3D visualization. As soon as you switch into any 3D view, so that's top, right, left, right isometric, left isometric, you're going to see the 3D geometry. This is completely separate geometry, a completely different object. It can have different attribute settings, can even have, basically different location or insertion points. These hybrid objects, for the most part, can be plugins or symbols. Almost all of our more complex plugins are hybrid objects. Walls, stairs, all of these objects are hybrid. You see a different 2D representation in top plan than you do from your 3D representation. Symbols, as I mentioned, can also be hybrids. When we double clicked to edit a symbol earlier, you may have noticed there was a menu that popped up that mentioned, do you want to edit the 2D or the 3D component? This gives you the ability to go into two separate sections of the symbol, one for the 2D geometry and the other for the 3D geometry. Now let's go over resources. Resources can be either objects like symbols, as I mentioned earlier, or can be attributes that are applied to objects. A few other types of resources are gradients, hatches, line types, image fills, and even records and worksheets. Let's talk about attribute resources, such as like hatches or line types. These can be applied to objects. For example, here I have just a simple line. If I go to our resource browser, go down to the line type section, I can drag and drop a line type onto this object from the resource browser. It then applies to the line, and it now is showing that line type. The benefit of resources is to give you the ability to have essentially universal resources or quick access to different types of resources through various files. The resource browser not only shows you resources that are in your current document, but can also access resources that are saved in other files or library files. Symbols are also resources. If I go down here, you can see we have the symbol that we created earlier. This symbol can be just dragged and dropped, and I can place a new instance of that symbol in the document. The great thing about this, and one of the advantages of symbols, is that basically these are all linked to the symbol definition that's saved as a resource in the resource browser. So if I go and right click on this resource in the resource browser, I can edit it here. And when I edit it, these changes will filter down to any instance of the symbol. So I had two in the document. I'm going to just add an additional circle to this symbol. Once I click exit symbol in the upper right corner, you'll see the two instances that are in the document update and now show that circle. This is a great thing about resources, that essentially they're editable, and a simple change here, just a single change to a resource, will filter down to any time it's used in this file. And this goes for the attribute resources as well, such as hatches, line types, gradients. If you adjust them or edit them here, those will affect any time they're used in the file. This concludes the Basics Getting Started Guide. I would strongly suggest going on to our other Getting Started guides. These go into even more detail on specific versions of the software, such as Fundamentals, Architect, Landmark, Spotlight, and RenderWorks.